With my college football schedule preview point spread prediction videos. Today I'll be doing the Utah Utes. So Utah gets two non-conference games that I would say are pretty much guaranteed wins for them. Cal Poly, an FCS team, is 100% sure win for Utah, and Wyoming. I would say is a 99% sure win for Utah. And they play one Power Four non-conference game against UCLA, but this is not an unfamiliar opponent for Kyle Whittingham because this used to be a conference game for Utah. Whittingham has coached against UCLA many times. And something interesting about this game is last night, former Tennessee quarterback Nico, I did leave you, transferred to UCLA. And while I do think he'll be an upgrade for them at quarterback because their quarterback situation was such a mess last year, I don't think he's going to be a huge help for them because he was really just an average quarterback last year. And even though he is a five-star quarterback, UCLA does not have an offensive expert like Chip Kelly anymore. But Nico, I did leave you, is a better quarterback than what Utah had last year. But if I was a Utah fan, I wouldn't be real concerned about this because UCLA's offense was such a dump last year that if it hadn't have been for their defense, they probably wouldn't have won a game. And Utah has a much better lines of scrimmage than UCLA does. At least they should, especially on the offensive side. I am very high on Utah's offensive line this year because they returned all five of their starters. So I would lean Utah in this game because Utah also has a better coach than UCLA does. So overall, this is not a very tough non-conference schedule. So they have six different opponents than last year in the conference. So last year they played Oklahoma State, Arizona, TCU, Houston, Iowa State, and Central Florida. And instead, this year they will play Texas Tech, West Virginia, Cincinnati, Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas. Because even though Utah played Baylor last year, it didn't count as a conference game. And replacing Iowa State with Kansas State, I don't think is going to make much of a difference. Kansas State is going to be a tough one for Utah to win because the Kansas State, like Utah, has good lines of scrimmage, and Kansas State's wide receiver Jace Brown is one of the best receivers in the Big 12, and Utah loses their two best pass catchers from last season, Keithy at tight end and Dorian Singer at wide receiver. And Utah also loses their one good running back, Micah Bernard, and Kansas State's running back Dylan Edwards. From watching him in the bowl game, it looks like he might be a superstar player this year, and Kansas State has a much better quarterback than Utah does. And I think this is a tougher conference schedule than last year's because four of those six teams that I named that they played last year were bad teams. Oklahoma State, Arizona, Houston, and Central Florida. And in the new schedule, they only get to play two bad teams from last year, Cincinnati and Kansas, and neither one of those teams were as bad as those four teams that I just named. And Cincinnati is the one conference game that I would feel very confident in Utah winning. I would call it a likely win for them, but far from a guaranteed win because Cincinnati does rank 12th in the country in returning production at 68%, which includes a quarterback that's a dual threat that had a pretty good year last year. Sorsby is his name. And ending the season on a Friday on the road against Kansas, I think is going to be hard for Utah because at Kansas and at Utah last year overall were very similar. While Utah should have a better defense and better lines of scrimmage than at Kansas, well, I think Kansas is going to have a better quarterback than Utah will. And when a team plays a team similar to them, on a weekday on the road, even though Kansas has one of the worst home field advantages in the country, that road team almost always it seems to lose. And another thing that makes this schedule tougher is last year they only played one of what I would consider to be a solid team, TCU. And this year they play two of those at Texas Tech and Baylor. And I think it is good that Utah gets their second bye week before a road game against Baylor. And I think their first bye week comes at a good time because it comes before Arizona State, which on paper is the best team in the Big 12. But with Utah getting this one at home and an extra week to prepare for it, I would give them a very good chance of pulling the upset. But the two in a row against Arizona State and BYU is by far, in my opinion, the toughest two in a row on Utah's schedule. I don't really think they have much of a chance of going at 2-0 in that, and I don't think they have much of a chance of going at 2-0 between Texas Tech and Baylor either. Uh, Colorado no longer has Shador Sanders, and Utah got blown out uh, last year by Colorado because of him. He threw for 340 yards against Utah, and uh, Colorado is not physical like Utah. They're a very soft team. So now for the point spread prediction, games in the green are games where I think that Utah will be favored to win by a blowout, which is 20 or more points, and there's two of those, Cal Poly and Wyoming. Games in the purple are games where I think they'll be favored to win by about a touchdown, 6 to 9 points, and there's one of those at Cincinnati. Games in the pinker games where I think Utah will be favored to win by about a field goal at 1 to 5 points, and there's four of those at UCLA, Texas Tech, West Virginia, and Colorado. Games in the gray are games where I think Utah will be about a field goal underdog, and there's four of those. Arizona State, BYU, Baylor, and Kansas. Games in the yellow are games where I think Utah will be about a touchdown underdog, and there's one of those at Kansas State. So Cal Poly, Utah should be favored in that one by about 40 points at least. And Wyoming, the spread in that one will probably be around 20 points. And UCLA, I think Utah will be favored in that one by a point or two. And Texas Tech and Colorado, those are only in the pink because they're home games. If they were road games, they'd be in the gray. Utah will probably only be favored by like a point in both of those. And West Virginia, even though it's a road game, I put it in the pink because Utah does have a higher ceiling, in my opinion, than West Virginia does. But it wouldn't be shocking if West Virginia was a small favorite. But Utah, I'll say, will be favored by a point or two in that one. And Cincinnati, I think Utah will be favored by about 6 points in, but that'd be in the pink if it was a road game. And Kansas State, I think, will be favored over Utah by 6 or 7 points. And Arizona State, that one is in the gray because uh, Utah did play them close last year, and it's a home game for Utah. But I think Arizona State will be favored by about 5 points in that one. And I think BYU will be favored by, I'll say, 4 points against Utah. That it would be in the yellow if you were just comparing rosters, probably, but because it's a rivalry and Utah nearly beat them last year, I put it in the gray. And Baylor, I'll say, will be a 3 point favorite over Utah because it's a home game for Baylor. In Kansas, because it's a road game, I'll say will be favored by a point or two over Utah. So that will be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.